Good afternoon to all. Today we will discuss how to make white sandwich bread and how we can prepare number of derivatives out of that white sandwich bread. Okay? Any bread in the world can be prepared out of this white sandwich bread. There are only 5 normal ingredients which we daily use in our day-to-day kitchen, and those are the base for making any type of bread anywhere in the world. So we will discuss about the ingredients first of all. The 5 ingredients: flour. Refined flour is the major ingredient for preparing white sandwich bread. Why we use refined flour? It has already been discussed. Refined flour has got a particular type of protein, that is gluten, which is present in refined flour in maximum quantity. That is why we use refined flour. None of the other flours like corn flour, maize flour has the quantity of gluten, has lesser quantity of gluten, because of which we do not prepare the bread except using refined flour. The second ingredient which we are going to use is sugar. Why we basically use sugar? Sugar is used to give taste to the bread, that is understood. The second main reason of using sugar is it is a food for the yeast. We cannot prepare a bread if we do not use sugar, because sugar acts as a food for the yeast. It helps out in giving color to the bread. It helps in giving a brown crust color to the bread, that is due to the caramelization of the sugar. The third ingredient which we are going to use is salt. Salt is basically used to enhance the flavor of other ingredients which we are using in the bread, number one. Second, salt stops the activity of yeast. So, salt does not allow the yeast to go uncontrollable. Yeast grows through a process which is known as budding. It multiplies from a single cell to double cell to 2 cells to 4 cells. So salt is the inhibitor for the yeast. The major ingredient which we are going to use is yeast. Why yeast? Why only yeast? The reason for using yeast is because yeast reacts with sugar to give out carbon dioxide, ethyl alcohol plus water. The main reason of using yeast is it gives volume to the bread, that is it gives carbon dioxide which helps in giving volume to the bread. So that is why we use yeast. The last ingredient, but not the least, that is water. Water is used for binding of all the things together. So that is why we use water. For manufacturing of bread, white bread, there are certain precautions which you should keep in mind while preparing a white bread. The first precaution is the water should be at room temperature. It should not be very cold. Okay? Because the yeast grows at a particular temperature, that is around 26 degrees centigrade to 35 degrees centigrade. So you need to have a particular temperature for yeast to get activated. The second major precaution, the oven temperature should be at the correct temperature before you start preparing white bread. It should be around 200 degrees centigrade for preparing the bread. The third thing which you should keep in mind is you should grease out and keep ready all the equipments which are required for preparing the bread, like bread molds. It should already be greased nicely, properly. They should be clean for preparing the white bread. Now we will start off with white bread. For preparing bread, we just need to dissolve the yeast in small quantity of water. Why we are using only small quantity of water? Because if we dissolve the yeast in large quantity of water, and if the water remains, the yeast will be left behind and we will not be having the same volume of the bread as is required. So the quantity of yeast will decrease if we are going to use full water and the water remains behind. There are different quantity of water. For preparing bread, we should use strong flour, which has got a gluten content of around 14%. Okay? But Indian flours are not so strong. They have gluten content of around 11 to 12%. So either we should add extra gluten to it. Now we will add dissolved yeast water into this dough. Along with this, we will put sugar and salt. The first step for making bread is mixing. The other precaution which needs to be kept in mind is don't use both hands, keep one hand clean, okay? So that you can handle any equipment with the other hand. The first step is mixing. You just have to mix all the ingredients together. The dough which we are preparing is for 1 kg. The recipe is for 1 kg. The recipe for white bread is 1 kg of refined flour, 60 grams sugar, 25 grams of yeast, 15 grams of salt, and 600 ml water. Sugar 60, salt 15 grams, yeast 25 grams, and 600 grams of water. Approximately 600. It can vary upon the strength of the flour. If it is a strong flour, it will require more water. That can go up to 650, 700. And if it is a weak flour, then it will go, it can vary from 550 to 600. I require some more water. The second step is kneading of the dough. Okay? Once you have collected all the ingredients together, we binded all the ingredients with the water. The second step is kneading. You just need to knead the dough with your both the hands. Why kneading is done? Kneading is done so that the gluten becomes extendable, and the gluten will help in giving volume to the bread. So to make the gluten extendable, we will do the kneading. ठीक है, after kneading the dough will be very smooth. You can see the texture of the dough. It is very smooth from the top. Another ingredient which you can add, it is optional. You can add a little bit of oil to make the bread tender. It will help in making the bread very soft. And the other property of the oil is that it is hygroscopic in nature. It helps to retain the bread fresh. It helps to absorb the moisture from the air. So that is why we basically use oil. So we can, if we are preparing the bread for our home, or if we want to make a very good bread, so we can always go for a little bit of oil. So behind 1 kg of refined flour, we are going to add 50 ml of oil into this. 50 ml. And again we need to do the kneading so that oil gets evenly distributed in the dough. Once all the oil has gone into the dough, we need to round up the dough. You should make a round ball so that the air which is being formed in the dough does not escape out from the cut surface of the dough. If there are cut surface on the dough, the air will escape. So we need to make a very smooth round ball from the top. After making the ball, we need to keep it for the proofing. Okay? For keeping it for the proofing, we need to apply a little bit of oil on the utensil in which we will be keeping this dough for the proofing. This is done so that the dough does not stick to the utensil. Another precaution which needs to be taken is you should cover this dough with the help of a wet cloth. You dip that cloth in the water and squeeze it out so that it is slightly wet. This is done to prevent any skin formation on the top of the dough. So we will cover up this dough and keep it in the oven for the first proofing. In the meantime, we can prepare our molds. We can slightly grease the mold in which we are going to keep the loaf. It has to be nicely greased so that the bread does not stick to the mold itself. It has to be greased nicely from all the 4 sides. Even the cover of the mold should be very nicely greased. After we take out the dough after the proofing, we basically knock back the dough, that is taking out the air from the dough. It will help the yeast to reactivate and give more volume to our bread. So what we do, basically we punch down the dough with the hands and again make a round ball out of it. and again allow it to rest for another 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, we will take out the dough and mold the dough according to the shape of the bread. You can apply a little bit of oil on the table if required, so that the dough does not stick to the table. For the molding, you need to do a very tight molding, or else the loaf will open up after the baking. You need to press it very hard. After the molding, you need to put it in the pan and slightly press it with the back of your hand, so that the dough gets evenly spread in the pan. Now we are going to put the lid on the top. But we should allow a little opening in the mold, so that we should be able to see how much proofing has been done in the mold. Again, it will go for the second proofing in the proofing chamber. Out of the same dough, we can prepare dinner rolls also. Dinner rolls are the rolls which are served with the soup. We can give number of shapes to the rolls. It depends upon your creativity, it depends upon you, what type of shape you want to give. We can even prepare sweet buns out of this white dough. You need to add little bit of cherries as well as to give it a shape of bun. We can even prepare a French loaf out of this white bread dough. Again, all the products will go for the proofing. In the proofing chamber. And after the proofing, we will apply a little bit of egg wash or milk wash on the top, so that it gets a nice golden brown color. After the baking, the final product is like this. This is buns, these are dinner rolls. Thank you.